All right, good morning. We begin again in our book, Disciplines of a Godly Man by R. Kent Hughes. And we're really in a great chapter. This is chapter 4, Discipline of Fatherhood. I hope the beginning of the introduction was a blessing to you. Today we're going to get right into it with fatherhood's do nots. There are some do's of fatherhood and there are some do nots. The do nots come first, so let's begin there. The do not is perfectly clear because it literally means do not provoke your children to anger so they begin to seethe with resentment and irritation. The New English Bible captures the idea very well. You fathers again must not goad your children to resentment. The directness and simplicity of this do not invites us to do some honest thinking about the ways we goad our children to exasperation. First one being criticism. Near the top of most lists have to be criticism. Every year when our family decorates our Christmas tree and I place a tiny red and green glass beaded wreath on the tree, I think of the little boy who gave it to me when I coached soccer. His sarcastic, demeaning father would run up and down the field, belittling his boy with words like chicken and woman. He was the only parent I ever told to be quiet or leave the field. I wonder sometimes how that boy, now a man, has fared. Winston Churchill had such a father in Lord Randolph Churchill. He did not like the looks of Winston. He did not like his voice. He did not like to be in the same room with his son. He never complimented him, only criticized him. His biographers excerpt young Winston's letters begging both parents for his father's attention. Quote, I would rather have been apprenticed as a bricklayer's mate. It would have been natural, and I should have got to know my father. End quote. Fathers who criticize their children often bring them to discouragement. The parallel version of this do not in Colossians 3:21 indicates that children embittered by nagging and deriding lose heart, like a horse that had its spirit broken. You can see it in the way a horse moves, and you can see it in the eyes and posture of a disheartened child. Criticism, oops, sorry about that. All right. Criticism comes in many ways besides overt words. Some parents never praise their children on principle. My praise will mean something when I give it. Only they never give it. Then there is faint praise, backhanded praise, like that given to a boy who had just scored a soccer goal, and someone says, That was okay, son. Now, next week we can do better. Often it is not the words, it is the tone of voice or the distracted eyes which say it all. Why are fathers so critical? Perhaps that is the way that their fathers treated them. Perhaps they are simply critical people who mask it well in public, but cannot restrain themselves in the heart of domestic relationships. To such fathers, God's word comes like an arrow headed for the bullseye. Do not exasperate your children with criticism. Second one is over strictness. Over strictness. Some fathers exasperate their children by being overly strict and controlling. They need to remember that rearing children is like holding a wet bar of soap. Too firmly a grasp and it shoots from your hand, and too loose of a grip and it slides away. A gentle but firm hold keeps you in control. We cannot begin to estimate the ravages of over strictness on the evangelical Christian community over the years. I have had occasion in my ministry to bury people who lived virtually all of their 70 years in reaction to the harsh legalism of their upbringing. Lost bars no one could manage to pick up. Others were not so tragic. They came to renounce legalism biblically and theologically, but still wrestled with it emotionally for the rest of their lives. Why are some fathers overly strict? Many because they are trying to protect their family from an increasingly Philistine culture, and smothering rules seem to be the best way to accomplish that. Others are simply controlling personalities who use rules, money, friendship, or clout to rule their children's lives. The Bible, read through their controlling grid, becomes a license to own and dominate. Still others wrongly understand their faith in terms of law rather than grace. Some men are overly strict because they are concerned about what others will think. Quote, what will they think if my child goes to this place, or wears this clothing, or is heard listening to that music? End quote. Not a few preachers' kids have been catapulted into rebellion because their fathers squeezed their lives into to fit their parishioners' expectation. What a massive sin against one's children. Rather, we ought to begin our fatherhood by holding the tiny helpless bar snugly, but as it grows, gradually and wisely loosen our grip. As conscientious fathers, we have to say no to many things. Thus, we should also try to say yes to as much as possible and save our no's for the really important situations. We must be biblical in regard to our no's. And as our children grow, be prepared to discuss the rules biblically and principally. We must learn to trust God with our children, realizing they must learn to make decisions for themselves. Fathers, do not exasperate your children by being overly strict. Learn to hold their lives with God's pressure and to mold it with His love. The third one is irritability. Irritability. We have all seen it and perhaps done it. The father walks in the door after a pressured day, preoccupied with brow furrowed. His 3-year-old comes running to him, but Dad is busy unburdening himself to his wife. Just a moment, Jimmy. Jimmy tugs at his father's trousers. No response. He tugs again. His father explodes, picks him up, and swats him hard for being rude. Only the Lord knows how many children lose heart because their fathers have hard days. Life is sometimes like the cartoon where the boss is grouchy toward a worker. His employee in turn comes home and is irritable with the children. His son then kicks the dog runs down the street and bites the first person he sees, the boss. We fathers must never let our pressures drive us into this unhappy cycle. The costs are too high. Some say you treat your fellow man on the level, but when you are home with the wife and kids, are you mean as the devil? Your kids know. Next one is inconsistency. Few things will exasperate a child more than inconsistency. Pity the horse that has a rider who gives it mixed signals, digging his heels into its side and pulling the reins at the same time. Pity the child even more who has the rules changed by a capricious father who is always exasperated because of the conflicting messages he receives. Fathers, you may forgive yourself by saying, I'm so busy. Memory isn't my thing. I'm just a spontaneous person. But your children will not. Be consistent. Never, ever make a promise to your child you don't intend to keep. Do any unfulfilled promises come to mind? Horseback riding that never happened, trips to the ice cream store or the ballpark, you may forget, but you have a little boy or girl who will remember it 80 years from now. Lastly, favoritism. One of the most exasperating and damning sins a father can commit against his children is favoritism. I say this despite being the last one who would suggest you should treat all your children alike. Some children need more discipline, some need more independence. Some need more structure, some need less. Some need more holding than others, some need more encouragement, but no child should be favored over another. Favoritism was the damning sin of Isaac, who favored Esau over Jacob. Ironically, it was also the damning sin of Jacob, who favored Joseph over his brothers. Like favoring father, like rejected son. How crushing, how disheartening to know that you were less favored, less loved. Men, the great do not of fatherhood is, do not exasperate your children. And life tells us the resulting do nots of this are, for example, do not be critical, do not be over strict, do not be irritable, do not be inconsistent, and do not show favoritism. God has created our children with our hearts turned toward us. Our power is awesome. We must take God's word to heart. And tomorrow we'll go into the fatherhood do's. So here's some food for thought. What did you expect or want from your father? Has this happened? Why or why not? What do your children expect or want from you? Is this happening? Why or why not? And are you living out the do nots of Ephesians 6:4? Thanks, guys. Hope you'll join me again tomorrow in our book, Disciplines of a Godly Man. God bless.